Welcome to the Tourism AI podcast, where we talk about all things at the intersection of artificial intelligence and tourism. And today we are continuing on with our conversations between Kendall and I, talking about some of the top stories and some big things happening out in the world of AI, and sort of dissecting some of those stories and kind of trying to help people understand what it means for them in tourism. So, with that, Kendall, why don't I pass it over to you and you can introduce some stories.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to say at the end of the episode, we're going to be talking about a chip that is faster than any traditional ones. So if you want to know who's developing it, stay tuned to the end. But the first big story came out a few days ago and it's been all a buzz online. So the headline is Albania appoints first AI cabinet member. So they are the first government anywhere to appoint a digital cabinet member. And this one, her name is Delia, and she is her role is a procurement minister. So her mission is to ensure that procurements are 100% incorruptible. Apparently, that's been a problem there. I'm sure that that is not the only government where that is a problem. So I guess I'll just get your kind of initial thoughts on that before we dive in.
Yeah, so I think it's a very interesting story, and I think we'll sort of see how it goes. But to me, this story speaks to a couple things. First of all, obviously, it seems like everybody's at risk when it comes to AI and its disruption to AI. If they can make a government cabinet minister an AI chatbot or AI sort of agent, I guess, for lack of better terms, what's stopping anybody from making a CEO or a VP or, you know what I mean, and whatever. So it definitely is interesting. I have a lot of questions around this in terms of, okay, it's going to be incorruptible, but obviously there's humans behind designing the AI, and so I think it sounds like a nice headline, but will it actually be incorruptible? How is it built? Sort of how is decision making sort of framed? Where do humans fit in the whole loop? Like, I think there's a lot of questions still behind the headline for me that I'm not really convinced. To me, it sounds like a bit of PR and a little bit of sort of a good spin, but I'm not sure if it's gonna solve their government corruption problems or not, to be determined. I'm not saying it won't, I'm not saying it will, but for me, I have a lot of questions around sort of what does that mean and what does it mean it's incorruptible and who makes, at the end of the day, humans are behind all of these things, right? So even things like we know AI has bias built into it because, it consumes the internet, the world's information on the internet, which has biases built into it. And so how is this built not to have biases? And, how does it how is its decision making? How transparent is its decision making? So, a lot of questions. I'm sure we'll get more information as the headline wears thin and the questions start to come up. And I'm sure at some point there'll likely even be a lawsuit that'll be tied to this cabinet minister and its decisions that it made,
Mhm.
because people will probably be asking those same questions, right?
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. I think you nailed it in terms of transparency and accountability. I mean, I can really see like something like this as a benefit to if I look at our government. And that's a whole different rabbit hole that we probably won't get down right now. But where I could
Let's
see
not go
like,
there.
a digital government agent is like answering CRA questions and like Service Canada questions, right? Like it'd be, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it helps the corruption, as you say. And this is in Albania, let's just be clear too, this is the Socialist Party who has brought this on. Again, just kind of like interesting to see if different governments around the world implement something like this and kind of where they lean on the spectrum there. But
Yeah. What I will say though, Kendall, is that this actually speaks to a bit of a broader story and a bit of a broader trend that's happening is that governments are really investing a lot in AI, in transforming the public sector with the help of artificial intelligence. So we will talk a little bit about the Canadian government because our Prime Minister is saying that he wants to see reductions in costs of the public service, and I know that some of those I think there's a belief that some of the work that public servants can do can be automated with AI tools. And to your point, even the CRA. I mean, that is a rabbit hole that I'll gladly go down that rabbit hole because it is maybe the worst organization I've ever had to ever deal with in my life on multiple fronts. It just isn't functioning well. Even the minister responsible for the CRA, I think, recently said that it sort of hit quote unquote rock bottom as an organization. And so, to me, if you hit rock bottom, I would look to technology how to rebuild as opposed to sort of look to humans and people how to rebuild, right? And how can you sort of overcome some of those challenges and systemic problems with technology and AI? And to your point, like there's it seems like to me, an organization like the CRA or many government organizations, there's lots of policy, there's lots of rules that an AI should technically be able to follow, right? Fairly well and fairly accurately. And so, that's sort of I guess, the broader trend of government. I think if they're going to be looking to reduce the cost of government and the size of government, I think AI and technology is a big part of that solution. And I think similarly, and to bring it to tourism, similar kind of decision making can probably be made in many tourism related aspects and roles, right? So it is, while it's a bit, to me, PR sort of hypey and sort of questions to be answered, it's definitely pointing to a bigger trend of intelligent augmentation of human intelligence and human work.
Would you let a digital, I mean, not minister, but like you mentioned, like a CEO, but so let's just say for your own company or for like any tourism boards, do you think that there's a use case, or like would you be comfortable testing it as like a marketing manager, for example, initiating like campaigns based on the data and information it has? Like how comfortable would you feel with that at this point right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me it comes down to I would be comfortable testing it and playing around with it as long as there's like a good, responsible AI's policies and principles in place that sort of indicate where the human in the loop comes in, that there's human oversight, that ultimately humans make the decisions, right? So, again, it's like there's a lot of components of marketing, communications, customer service, decision making at the government level that is a lot of just box checking, for lack of better terms, right? Is this done? Is this exist? If I let's look at an RFP. Okay, the RFP says you need to have these 15 things. Okay, are all these 15 things here? Yes, proceed to the next step, right? So, I mean, that is an automatable process all day long, right? That I would 100% trust an AI to do. And as long as, yeah, the other thing I would say is that when it comes to decision making like this, probably there would need to be some kind of mechanism to challenge the decision as well, right? And that would have to be an important component, especially early on. But once you get sort of, again, it's sort of like where does the AI fit? Where do the humans fit? And how do you, and what is the mechanism through which people can then challenge the decision of the AI if if it miss if it's saying you need these 15 things in order to proceed to step two, and you have those things but you haven't been put forward, well, there should be a way to challenge that, right? The AIs make mistakes, we know that. They're not perfect, they hallucinate, they do things, so that has to be part of the equation. So I think it's complicated, but again, I think people should be sitting up and taking notice when they see articles like this and announcements like this. Things are moving fast, and I think that if people think, oh yeah, we'll get to this whole AI thing, eventually, your competitors are doing things like this and trying things and experimenting. Interestingly, I don't know if you remember, there's a company called Klarna, which is a customer service company, who the CEO was pretty ambitious about, sort of, we're going to replace as many humans as possible with these AI customer service agents. And that was sort of the ambition at the beginning. And then eventually he kind of realized that he went too far too fast. And then he sort of now went on a big hiring spree to, kind of rehire a bunch of people and make sure he has enough humans there to do the work, right? So, that was early. This feels a bit early to me as well, but eventually over time we will be in a place where full jobs are being handled by AI agents, and it's a brave new world.
I think that segues perfectly into our next headline, actually. So the headline is Get Ready for Robot Hotels. So, talking
Mhm.
about technology taking over full jobs, this
Yeah.
article is talking about just that. So, robots checking in guests, mixing drinks, handling housekeeping. So, this has been in Japan for a while, and I have a bit of an experience I can share about that. But now it's starting to come to the US. So, big chains like the Marriott are starting to implement these. And I guess, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how I feel about this. I'll just quickly tell you my brief experience in Japan. It wasn't like a full robot at the front desk, but it was like a digital screen check-in, and you were talking to somebody on a computer. So, you didn't have a person there. And it felt
Mhm.
really impersonal to me. Like, I love tourism for the people. And I feel like there's just some areas where I don't want to see robots.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, I think, okay, there's definitely places to add automate. I'm going to call it automation or AI powered automation. And, the form factor, obviously it's fun to have a little robot form factor or whatever, but, I think you got to be careful, right? And I think to your point, it's like sort of like what is, like we're already doing this to a big extent. I can check into a hotel and I'll get a text message. It's similar where the text message will allow me to sort of, do X, Y, and Z and, start my check-in process early and speed up the process, right? So, to your point is like this stuff is all over the place already. It's just a matter of, to me, it's like, okay, great. You're going to have a robot or some kind of AI sort of, you know, engaged in part of the process. Now, where do you put the human in the loop to really wow the tourist and give them that elevated experience, right? And I think it depends on the type of brand you are, right? If you're just a, you know, expensive hotel, just in and out, whatever, probably fine, right? I want to pay as little as possible, then probably you get what you pay for, right? But if you're like, sort of providing an experience and it's a luxury hotel or service is an important part of your hotel offering, then absolutely not, or at least sort of like again, figure out where the human can come in and add that spark and that wow factor, right? So, I think this to me speaks for the need to have an aligned strategy. And so if you think about sort of your AI strategy and aligning it with your overall strategy, that's really important, right? So to me, we talk about alignment a lot at Tourism AI Network, and it's all about the alignment, right? So like, what are the goals of your organization, your hotel, and if you're, trying to be a high touch, great experience, you know what I mean, giving that wow factor, then you need to understand how AI fits into that and doesn't fit into that, right? AI isn't the solution for everything. And so, if you're trying to be up here in experience, but you're bringing in, robots to bring your prices down and making it, then you're probably misaligned, right? So that's kind of my overall gut feeling. But that, I think it's awesome to see experimentation happening. And, I think big brands, I would imagine, a big brand like a Marriott or something like that is being selective of which properties they're like testing this stuff out in, right? So I think those big brands sort of, have the resources to quote unquote get it
Hmm.
and understand the value. But I think we're going to see more and more of this kind of stuff, and I think we're going to see mistakes. And I think I always tell people it's like you don't want to be the poster child for what not to do, and so like proceed cautiously.
Yeah, I'm laughing because an example in the article is actually just to your point. This hotel brand in Japan, like 10 years ago, fired like over 400 staff amongst their chains and brought in these robots. And then they had all sorts of glitches. Like the robots were waking people up in the middle of the night when they heard snoring because they thought that people were like calling for service. And now they've hired back people. So, like you said, there's
Yeah,
kind of like, I need to keep that mix, but I do see some tasks like maybe in the housekeeping department, there's those laundry folding robots and even concierge, like recommending like where to go for dinner or, that all that data can be pulled from the DMO website, possibly for the hotels. And like you said, there's definitely some areas where it could be useful, but maybe not a full on. And it too, like just you know, the humanoid robots, they're just kind of like creepy looking. Like, just
yeah,
show us what it is. Show us a screen that we can talk to, or like more of like a chat thing. I don't know. It could be kind of
yeah,
creepy when you're checking in somewhere at 2 o'clock in the morning.
yeah.
Do you think
I think you
that
need
one
to
of
tread carefully.
yeah, totally. Do you think that, as this is taking off, this kind of opens up like a whole new, you can leave reviews on like TripAdvisor and like Expedia and stuff, that there will be like a whole new kind of review segment for brands like robots, like robot service.
Hmm. It's a good question. Probably. I mean, I think at a minimum, what you're going to get is immediate feedback from customers, positive and negative. And so again, you got to do this stuff with your eyes open in terms of the risks you're taking. But yeah, maybe eventually it will be sort of rate this robot based on the experience you provided. Speaking of robots, this isn't in our list of topics, but China also unveiled for $3,000 you can get a robot wife now. So I'm tempted. I'm not going to lie to you, Kendall. Not because I want to replace my wife, but I just because I'd be interested to see what this thing does. You know what I mean? How it acts. Like, what does it do? What is it
Watch,
there for?
watch
Just
out,
companionship
Christina.
or what's that?
I said, watch out, Christina.
Yeah, watch out, Christina. Yeah, no, but I'm just like curious. Like, is it there for companionship, for conversation, for more, for less? Like, does it clean? Like, I'm very curious. I don't know. You know what I mean? So, not that I'm going to go there, but I think the point is this, and this is the reality. And I post a lot of stuff on my Instagram about like humanoid robots. Man, these things are evolving fast, and their capabilities are incredible. Like I posted one yesterday in my. I'm part of I go to MMA every day. So my little MMA group, and there was like this robot that was like fighting. It's like a robot that you can like fight with, and it like tripped and got up so fast. It was incredible, and it was like it got up so fast, like way faster than a human can get up, right? And so, there's all of this technology and all this development happening largely in China, where they're absolutely like leading the world on robotics. And what are the implications of that? What does that mean, right? And to me, I think if I think about there's already pushback by humans about AI and its role, like a lot. Now you start introducing humanoid robots, and sort of, I think you're going to get more pushback initially than buy-in. And I think so. Again, I think you really have to think about your use cases. I would maybe bring in one robot and really use it as a PR piece more than an actual replacement of humans. And you know what I mean? Like it's almost like a novelty to bring in, and it actually could be a good PR opportunity for your property. But, don't go and buy 50 robots and, to your point, replace, 80 humans and say we're done, because that would be a big mistake.
Yeah, it's funny you see like the rise of these like tech-free, like no cell phone resorts and areas you can go, right? Where it's like we don't have cell service. That's the whole point. Come and disconnect. I wonder too if we'll see kind of an uprise in kind of boutique properties or resorts and lodges, kind of like offering that angle, right?
Yeah.
Robot-free
Yeah.
vacations. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I just think this stuff is moving too fast for people. And so as a brand, yes, you want to be on the cutting edge, but you don't want to be on the absolute bleeding edge and then be the one that sort of, again, you don't want to be the poster child for, what not to do, and or just get on the wrong side of like the sentiment that's growing against this technology, right? It's growing fast, and some brand somewhere is going to be the catalyst of some kind of big sort of revolution or whatever, like protest or whatever, and like you don't want that to be your brand, right? I think so. I think just be careful, right? Just kind of
Hmm.
my overall sentiment here is caution.
Okay. So the next one is the competitive edge of integrated data versus siloed approaches. Okay, kind of a boring topic. I'm not going to lie. But when I saw the headline, I thought of the tool that we're building. So I'll just start off the question because I had never heard this term before. Have you heard of the term customer data platforms?
I've heard of the term, yeah.
CDP? Okay. I hadn't. So I just thought it was a kind of a cool thing. So CRMs traditionally kind of, keep track of some data. It tries to piece together the puzzle of how the data all connects. But this CPD, customer data platform, pulls in data from everywhere: your bookings, your loyalty programs, your marketing tools, third party sources. And it kind of creates this comprehensive guest profile, right? So it allows people or companies to like do personalization and just kind of tell the story of how your data is all working together.
Hmm.
So I just thought, this article is talking about how this is the way forward, and it's not necessarily talking about any sort of platform. It's just saying that these types of data sources will be very important for businesses. So I just thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to chat a little bit about the tool that we're
Yeah,
building.
absolutely. Absolutely. So as I think if you've listened to this podcast, you know that we're sort of working on our own data platform currently, and really data integration is the core function of the platform we're building. Because if you can integrate the data and turn it into one data source, then you can start to do things with your data that has value, right? So, I mean, I think this article is absolutely correct. You know this. We just did a deep dive into all of our data at Tourism AI Network the other day, and it was like, pulling, I don't know, 10 reports from 10 different tools that all kind of give one piece of the story, right? And nothing that sort of integrates it all together. And I think that's a missing piece. I can tell you, I've done a lot of interviews with tourism professionals over the summer, and these data silos is a huge pain point for everybody, right? So, and also, once you have this integrated data, then you can start to attribute things a little bit better, right? So, okay, this person came into our website through this channel, then they did this, then they did that, then they booked, then when they were here, they did this, then and to your point, you can build that customer profile, and you can really start to understand the customer, full life cycle of the customer. So yeah, absolutely. I think this is the way things are going. But I can tell you, obviously, big multinational sort of tourism organizations probably are better positioned to start leveraging these tools. But actually, small tourism operators and accommodators actually, if they do the work that needs to be done, there's an opportunity to leapfrog a lot of those big competitors. But there's a cost to all of this, right? So the challenge I think everybody has is it takes a lot of time. And you kind of said, I think you said earlier, this is a bit of a boring topic. My number one thing I keep telling everybody is that there's a lot of unsexy work that has to happen in order for us to leverage AI. And that is, to me, fundamentally where the conversation needs to be. Things like data hygiene, things like naming conventions, things like proper file structures. These are all of the things, standard operating procedures written down, not in people's heads, right? Playbooks, right? Brand guides, all of these things that business owners and leaders have been told for decades that they need to do all of a sudden is coming to a head. So, don't, my advice to people is don't start going to tools. Oh, geez, somebody's selling me some new, integrated data platform or customer data platform or whatever. Start off with what is this? What is our data looking like, right? What do we have going on from a data? Where are we in sort of the as a data driven organization? We just went through this. So, we have an audit that we offer to people. We just did it on ourselves, and we're not there yet as an organization. We have work to do from a data perspective, right? And so we're still early days. We're a small organization, and so really to leverage and take advantage of data more effectively, there's some stuff we need. It was identified that we need to do to better prepare ourselves, right? To me, I'm a broken record on this, but don't start going to buy tools. Start thinking internally in terms of your systems, processes, your business goals, what you're trying to achieve, and start working backwards on what you need to do internally to prepare for tools that can actually help you in the future. Because if you just buy the tool, spend the money, and you're not ready for it, you're going to spend a lot of money on the tool and you're not going to get the outcome that you're looking for anyways.
One of the quotes that stuck out to me from this article was that a single hotel reservation can have like 50 different data points that you could use. I thought that was really interesting. But just to kind of build upon your comment there about the smaller hotel chains or just like even smaller companies, in relation to the tool that we're building, I know pricing hasn't been set, but do you think that it's going to be something that can be attainable for kind of a smaller organization, or is this more, you know, a big chain play?
Yeah, so I'm 100% positioning this tool for small and medium-sized businesses. I've never been a guy that has been focused on the enterprise. I don't want to focus on the enterprise. Enterprise buying is very challenging and long, and obviously, yeah, you get enterprises in, it's great, but my focus is small, medium-sized businesses. My focus is also rural and remote tourism operators and DMOs. So really the people that need the help. And our price point, it's it's not set, but it's going to be quite affordable. So, and my whole reason for building this tool is conversations I've been having with a lot of CDMOs, a lot of small regional DMOs, a lot of rural and remote tourism operators and DMOs, and they just don't have the resources. Like these people don't exist in where they live, where they work. So we're not even talking about an augmentation or replacement of labor. We're talking about like the ability to do things that we just can't do because we don't have the people to do it, right? And so to me, that is the unlock. I'm not that interested in sort of, job displacement per se. It's more like, hey, you know what? This actually gives you the capacity to do things you've never been able to do before, right? So 100% small business focus is where we're going to be putting our efforts.
Look forward to watching all that unsexy work deliver something sexy. A good story to tell with everyone's data. It'll be
Yeah,
great to watch
totally.
that roll out.
And I think the other piece to this is like I think people underestimate the data they're sitting on, or the
Mm-hmm.
data they have, and so that's even part of it is just unlocking the fact that hey, we have data. A lot of people don't think they have data,
Yeah.
and it's like you have data, you just don't realize you have data, and so it's like okay, now how do we leverage that data, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I just said, that quote, right? One single reservation having 50 data points. You wouldn't
Hmm.
think that, but
You
yeah,
wouldn't think.
absolutely true. Okay, we're going to move into a little new segment, and this was something we talked about adding. You know, we're both parents, we both support kind of AI and tech adoption. I think we're both trying to navigate how to do this safely with our own children. So we're going to add a new little kind of parenting segment or article to our podcast. So the headline on this one is OpenAI to launch ChatGPT for teens with parental controls as company faces scrutiny over safety. So I just posted about this on LinkedIn actually. I've posted about something similar in the past, how I've built a custom GPT for my kids to use because there hasn't been any parental controls. So I am personally quite happy to see this as a first step. I still do think there's kind of risks in this and with using any AI, but again, I think this is a first great step. So, what are your thoughts just on kind of like looking at the headline, the initial kind of scan of the article?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a good first step. The reality is that one company can't do this alone and make an impact. Although obviously, OpenAI and ChatGPT is by far the biggest AI tool that people use. So obviously, them leading this is a positive for society, I think. And so yeah, I mean, I this is a bit of a can of worms, as you know, Kendall, because the problem often isn't the technology, and I'm just going to say it. The problem is the parents, and so I might get some parents that are mad at me, but like, if you just give your kids technology and you don't supervise their use, and you're not asking them questions and having conversations, and then you're putting your kids are doing risky things online, right? It's so I think it has to start with the parents, and it has to start with even the parents being educated. So like, to me, this like you start to peel the onion back a little bit, and AI literacy is something that every single human has to sort of think about, not only for their job, but also as parents, also as, just like leaders in their communities, right? Interestingly, I'm just sort of a bit of a side note here, but I was just listening to a podcast about or actually, no, I was actually sorry. OpenAI yesterday, last night, I was part of so OpenAI released a study about how people use AI, and I think it was either 70% or I think it was 70% or maybe 60% of AI use is actually and this is on the consumer apps. Obviously, the numbers will skew if you think about enterprise AI, but on the consumer ChatGPT app, I think it's 60% of use is like personal, not business use.
Oh, wow.
So people are using it a lot more at home in their personal lives than they are at work, at least the consumer app. So obviously you bring in enterprise AI and that changes the numbers, all that kind of stuff. But like, and I thought that was really interesting, right? And so, people are using these tools in their personal lives for a variety of different things. So it's being used at home. And so, to your point, it's like I also let my kids play with AI tools, and but with very, it's like make a cute animal, make a, whatever, very kind of limited use cases. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think this is a societal conversation that needs to happen. We know, the interesting thing about a lot of the other article that I'll kind of talk about now is A16Z, which is a sort of they do this kind of which AIs are being used based on like kind of internet traffic the most. And it was something like 30% of the AIs that are like most used by society are like essentially like character AI and like, I don't know, cheeky little monkey AI or whatever, like sex AI. Like there's all these different tools that are very highly used that I've never even heard of. And so, again, parents really need to be involved in what their kids are doing online. That's just my overall comment on this. Great that OpenAI is leading the charge, though.
Yeah, totally. And I will just highlight like a few of the risks that they are seeing already is that some of the guardrails that they've built in, I guess, as the conversations or that chat gets longer and longer, some of those guardrails are kind of like falling off. Do you know what I mean? Like the context is getting lost in the conversations. So that's one risk. And then the other one that I was actually raised in an Instagram video that I saw about something along the same lines is that, you know, just because it feels private doesn't mean it is. Anything you put online, assume it's public. So, yes, these tools are great and it's a great outlet for kids to be able to kind of have something to talk to if they're using it to talk about like feelings and problems they're having. But kind of teach your kids that, anything you say to it, though it is private in the moment, it could come surface itself at any point in life. So, really, like you just said, it's an opportunity for us parents to like co-learn with our kids, sit down beside them, like do some use cases, teach them how to spot hallucinations. And like we've talked about agency before too on this podcast and just in general, but like ask them reflective questions like,
Hmm.
how do you feel about this answer? Does it make sense to you? So it's really kind of, like you said, learning together at first, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll also say like, there we have this sort of comment here is, obviously this is it's reactive, not proactive. It's a response to lawsuits and some tragedies and some things that have happened in society. But on the other side of things, it's like they also are trying to figure out ways to allow parents to let their kids use AI more and play with the tools more. And so like obviously they're trying to hook kids into AI use. And so, to me, just like let's let our kids be kids. I don't know, Kendall, you and I grew up probably on bikes and on, like no technology in our lives. And it's interesting. And you even look at like, like the tech leaders, and a lot of them kind of talk about the fact that they don't let their kids use even the tools they're building. So like that's should say something to parents about, maybe the solution probably is more almost don't let your kids or limit their use as much as possible. My 9-year-olds don't need to be spending time on ChatGPT hours on end. Yes, we can play on it a little bit. Yes, we can ask it questions. We'll be sitting around the table sometimes and we want to get something clarified. So we'll put ChatGPT voice mode and we'll ask Chat, what the answer is or whatever, right? So I'm not saying there aren't use cases, but just to give your kid a tablet or whatever it is and let them run free for hours and hours on end is just bad overall.
I agree. It's a slippery slope, right? If you look at the just the trends with social media and all the things, very slippery slope. I
Yeah.
think maybe I'm already training my kids off of ChatGPT because everything is like, let me just ask ChatGPT, like a recipe or an egg replacement or like taking a picture of a bug bite. I'm like, what bug is? So now they're just getting sick of it. Like, oh, mom, like, why are you always asking ChatGPT? Like, don't you just know the answer yourself? So, maybe they'll just be turned off of it because of my use.
Yeah, but we also have, like it's interesting too because you also have like tools like Siri and tools like, the whatever the ones that just sit in your house and listen to absolutely every conversation you have and everything you say. I don't have one of those in my house because I think it's like crazy personally. So, that's where I sit on the whole thing. But, I think I posted something somewhere where, we used to back in the day, we used to, like be worried that, the government's listening to our phones and tapping into our phones. And it's like now we're just like putting devices out there and like allowing allowing every conversation we have to be listened to all the time, right? So I don't know. I just think we need to it's funny. Like, as much as I'm an AI enthusiast when it comes to business and business applications, I'm completely the opposite when it comes to personal lives and sort of like turning off devices and turning off screens and being disconnected as much as possible. I think we need to sort of like really, to me, it's like almost like I call it like a barbell strategy. It's not like somewhere in the middle. It's like one extreme and the other. And I think that's like a good, healthy way to think about it.
Sounds like you got some good balance then. That's good. Okay, well, this segues into our rapid fire round. I did lots of segues today, and I didn't even do that on purpose. So this is just working out for us. Okay, so our rapid fire round is just a few headlines and then getting your rating on it on a hype meter from 8 to 10, or sorry, from 0 to 10. So again, China is being brought up here. They are training kids in AI starting as early as age 9. They have introduced it into the curriculum to do 8 hours a year, which it's funny because that doesn't actually sound like a lot. And when you see the headline, it sounds like they're on AI all day, but it's 8 hours a year in their curriculum. And it is to teach them how to be tech literate and so they can lead innovation in the future. So, hype meter.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a big deal, and I'm going to give this like a 9 out of 10 in terms of a hype meter because, I'm on the board of my kid's school, and there's like almost like a running joke now. Every time Peter mentions AI, we should have a drink, and I could tell you, nobody's paying that much. I shouldn't say. It's starting to become a more broad, like a more ongoing conversation. Not really AI in school per se, but just things like, even as a board. we should have an AI policy around recording devices and things like that, right? But and I know teachers are using AI in my kids' school, but I don't think we're necessarily like it's not part of a curriculum. It's not part of what we're teaching. It's not part of what, right? And so I think we need to have much more of a conversation in North America about this. I think I don't know where I shared this, but I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about a school, actually a private school in the United States that uses AI technology to help learners sort of, kind of learn at their own pace, and the AI can kind of figure out where they're at and sort of, kind of figure out where their gaps are and their, challenges are. Anyways, point is that this school, they've reduced the amount of teaching time using these AI tools. Their results are really, really positive, and then they're spending more time just like off computers, outside, doing fun things. You know what I mean? Being kids, all those kinds of things. It's a very, very fascinating case study. And they're not necessarily teaching AI, but they're using AI to teach. So I think this needs to be a big conversation. I think this needs to be a big focus. And I can tell you we're working right now with a guy who's got his like master's in AI sort of technology, helping us create AI agents for some of our workflows. And man, there is some serious knowledge there. That's like, wow. I'm just watching. I'm not the tech guy. We have Juan on our team sort of working with him, but like there's a lot of technical things, in the background going on that is really helpful for people to understand. So I think the earlier we can help people, our kids understand the foundational elements of what this is all about and sort of how this is all works. I actually think that's a way for us to protect ourselves from the doomsday scenarios of the future. If we have kids that are growing up tech savvy from the ground up that really understand how this technology works, that potentially is part of an insurance policy to make sure that we don't get destroyed by these things. Yes, I think it's a really big deal. And China is obviously, I don't know if there's obviously a theme in this podcast, but leading in a lot of fronts. I think they see AI as a strategic opportunity for them to become the global dominant world power. So, North America needs to wake up.
Yeah. I like it, the use case, just to kind of say, or just to kind of go off on a tangent here. I like it for what you just said. Like with our tourism businesses that we talk about, how they can use AI so they can spend more time like out doing the things they love. If kids can use it in their school and whatnot, they can get their work done faster or get the, stuff done so they can be outside more. So it's kind of like, yeah, building that in, which I love.
And I've had a lot of conversations recently with entrepreneurs building, for example, AI tools that work with dyslexic kids. And I'm dyslexic and my son's dyslexic, and we use an AI powered sort of reading assistant tool. It's amazing. And my son is, excelling at reading and learning, and because the tool, it's much less painful. Like I grew up, being sort of not knowing I was dyslexic, and a lot of tears learning how to read at his age. And he enjoys it. He wants to go and read on his own, which is amazing, right? So the technology is really enabling and empowering if used properly. But I don't see us, certainly I see a lot more conversation in the United States about this. I'm not seeing enough conversation in Canada about this. I really think we should need to have more. Maybe it's just I'm not seeing it, I don't know, but not seeing it in the headlines. We're seeing a lot of headlines in China, you know. To me, it's a wake up call for North America. I know that the U.S. administration, the Trump administration, definitely sees AI as a strategic imperative, but I'm not necessarily sure if it's sort of made its way down into like the lower parts of society. And I can tell you, Canada, we need to wake the hell up. I've said this before, Canada is a great country despite itself. I've always used this. Canadians have always been strategically or things often we don't do anything, but because we have so many resources, we reap the benefits anyways. But I think this is sort of one of these situations where we really need to be proactive and we need to step up and we need to have like some serious conversations because I'm worried for Canada, honestly, around this AI conversation.
Okay, the next one is OpenAI launches jobs platform to compete with LinkedIn. So this is going to be, it hasn't launched yet, a new AI powered job board, and it will match candidates with jobs to kind of have more fewer generic resumes. It will use a GPT to refine applications in real time. And it's also going to have this kind of like, I know that OpenAI has an academy already, but that's going to be built right in. So on the applications, it will have different levels of AI fluency built right in. So look at that, another segue. We didn't even know it. But this whole AI fluency looks to be built in, like it's going to be a part of people's applications in the future, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So before I get your hype meter and take on this, I also just want to point out what is kind of interesting here is that the founder of LinkedIn was an early investor in OpenAI, and Microsoft owns LinkedIn, if I'm not mistaken, and Microsoft is an investor with OpenAI as well. So interesting that they're kind of like competing against themselves in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is so from a hype meter perspective, I think, I'll give this one a 7.5 out of 10. But I think, it's interesting. So I think OpenAI is realizing and sees the amount of disruption that AI is going to cause to the job market. And there's this, and there's the academy you mentioned, and there's some profit, some funding that they're putting out. There's a whole bunch of things OpenAI is doing that sort of, to me, almost like part of the solution to the problem they're causing. So it's like they're like the poison pill, and they're the blue pill and the red pill in this one, right? And so it's interesting, right? So I mean, obviously, I think they're seeing forward, and they see things like people getting certified, AI fluency being part of your application process, or like they see that as an important part of kind of sort of hiring in the future. And I think this platform is sort of built to kind of get people there. At the same time, it's pretty self-serving. Obviously, it's like AI fluency using ChatGPT or OpenAI technologies, right? So, they're smart. I think they're being proactive about sort of, trying to, they know that getting people to learn how to use their technology will turn those people into users of their technology and brand loyalists. And then also they know that, if they are on the sort of job support side of things, and they train a bunch of people, and then those people go to work for companies because they got hired for their AI skills, but those AI skills are ChatGPT and OpenAI skills, that's going to serve them as well. So I mean, there's a lot going on here, right? This is a big play, but fundamentally I think this really, to me, speaks to the disruption that I think they're anticipating in the job market, and the need for people to step up and get their AI literacy to a place.
Absolutely. Okay, 7.5 out of 10. I like it. Next on the list is this is a new feature in ChatGPT. So new AI models can handle nested conversations across formats. So what I like about this, and I haven't tried it out, but I'm going to now that I see this, is as you're having a conversation in ChatGPT, you can hover over an answer, and there's the three dots on the side. You can click on it, and it will say branch conversation. Have you tried this yet?
I haven't yet tried it, no.
Okay, so branch conversation. So that kind of response that it gives you, you can take that response and bring it into a new chat to continue having a conversation about that one thing. I'm sure that you do this because your mind like is in 10 different places above mine at all times. But I often am like, I want to continue chatting about this thing, but this response gave me an idea that but if you keep trying to talk about this, all the different things in the same conversation, it kind of gets diluted and confused. So now you can like branch your conversation and you can like start new chats with the different responses. So yeah, I'll let you speak to that and then give your hype meter.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome. I think it's a really cool feature. And to your point, I've had this happen a lot of times where it's like I'm going down a thread and I'm having a, sort of a thought sort of conversation, or sort of a thought exercise with ChatGPT. And then, yeah, all of a sudden it's like hits a point where now all of a sudden we're kind of talking about two things. So for me, I think, I think obviously, to me, actually, what this speaks to, Kendall, is, when I talk about, for example, when you're building a custom GPT for, your tourism organization or your DMO, it's better to build really, really narrow GPTs than try to build a broad GPT that sort of does everything, right? And this to me speaks to that strategically, right? It's the same thing, right? So obviously, if you're having conversations with an AI, the narrower the conversation, the better the outcome's going to be. And so this kind of allows us to, oh, we got a little broad, we can narrow it down a little bit and go down two paths or three paths or four paths or whatever. To me, that sort of is what that speaks to. What would be cool here, I think, as a next step for OpenAI is, how in Notebook LM you can do sort of a visual, sort of almost like what do you call it?
Mind map.
Mind map of
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, okay, so for context, for people that don't know, uh, Notebook LM is a Google tool where you can add a bunch of sources, and then you can ask questions of those sources. And one of the cool features that I really like, again, as a dyslexic person, is you can just say create a mind map of what's in these source documents, and it'll sort of just like kind of create a visual of what's in there. It'd be cool if you could almost have like a mind map where you have a conversation and you branch off and you branch off and you branch off, and then all of a sudden you have this sort of like, okay, here's the 15 conversations that this first conversation started
Yeah.
at in a visual way. It'd be a cool next feature for OpenAI. But I think I think it is a cool feature. So I'm actually going to give this one a 10 out of 10. I think we're going to actually see probably every leading AI model kind of probably model this and kind of evolve this. But to me, what's interesting about this, and I'll talk about, I'm putting together kind of a strategic plan right now, and I was using another tool which is Gemini, and I was using actually Gemini as a really cool what's called a gem, which if you don't use Gemini, it's the equivalent of like a custom GPT or a project. And they have a gem that's built in called Brainstormer, which I really, really like. And you know what'd be cool though is if you can sort of separate your threads and have multiple conversations, but at the end bring it all together.
Mm.
That would be
Yeah.
the other piece that I think would be because I'm using this gem for brainstorming around this business plan, and I at the end I said, "This is all great. Put it all together," and it was just horseshit what I put together. So I have to like manually go and put it all together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you can almost like pick different parts of the conversation, put it into here's the final, that would be really a neat evolution. But I think that's probably where things are going to be going.
Well, yeah, that sounds awesome. All right. Well, you'll have to test it out later and let me know what you think after using it.
Hmm. For sure.
All right, we are getting to our last article, and if you remember at the start of this episode, we said stick around to find out what is happening for the which country is building the fastest chip. What's your guess? You already said we have a theme going here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Okay.
our theme has been China all day, and I'm going to guess that it was China.
Yeah, so China builds an AI model based on human brain signals. So this basically it's a homegrown chip. It's called Meta X chip. And they raced to develop this after Trump's tech export restrictions to China, meaning that they had less reliance, on Nvidia chips. So they raced to do this. It claims it mirrors more of like a real brain, how a real brain thinks. And the example it gave was, traditional AI, when it reads a sentence like the cat was scared, it hid under the bed, it will assume that it means the cat. But this new model reads more like a human, where like you might scan some words and like see cat and it and just know that it refers to cat. So it's reading more human like, where you might skip some words and it's not reading every single word in there. So I know what your typical stance is on China, but just on a hype meter based on what you've seen in this article, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I'll just say that if it's true, then it's probably like a 9 or 10 out of 10. Whether it's true or not, we don't know yet, right? So, I mean, obviously, or whether it will actually perform as kind of they say it's going to perform, we don't know yet, right? So, but what I'll say to this is, really, if you look at the evolution of AI technologies from way back to the 1950s, where actually where this work started, it started off really as a neuroscientist trying to figure out and mimic how the brain works, right? And so like literally for what 75 years we've been like scientists have been trying to like essentially mimic the brain's activities. And they created these artificial neural networks which Jeffrey Hinton sort of brought, brought to life, in the last, whatever, since the 80s. And so, it doesn't surprise me that kind of scientists in the AI field right now are trying to even more kind of emulate the way the brain works, right? Fundamentally, if we think about artificial intelligence, literally what they're trying to do is like replicate the human brain. That is what these people are trying to do. And so, it sort of doesn't surprise me that this is sort of the direction and kind of how things are evolving. Scary. Like, I think AI generally is a bit scary. And if they're getting even closer to replicating the human brain and able to make these kinds of inferences faster and with less compute and sort of, starts to challenge what are known as scaling laws, which basically are, if you add more compute and more data, then you're going to get better outputs. But if they can sort of circumvent those scaling laws by being even closer to the way the brain works, then I could just see it only as accelerating AI, right? And AI development. So yeah, I think it's a pretty big deal if they've actually cracked that code.
Yeah, very cool. The other kind of piece of this article, too, that just kind of jumped out at me is obviously you just said Trump wants the US to be like the AI superpower. And so inevitably, that's why he kind of put some restrictions on what was being sent to China to maybe put some roadblocks in for them and kind of had a counter effect where it just kind of made them race to develop something quicker or better, or maybe not better, but, to innovate faster. So it's interesting, competition breeds innovation, as we know. But sometimes with certain restrictions, there's people circumvent them in different ways.
Yeah, and like, the thing about China, like obviously this is the China episode, so we might as well talk about China more. But like the thing about China as a sort of a centrally planned communist government is like they can be very deliberate about sort of like putting their resources to certain goals or projects or, things they want to solve. And, they can kind of move pretty fast because if they put all of their resources into, solving one big thing, they're going to solve that thing fast, right? And, we have labs in North America that are all working on different things and, it's a free market and they're freely going wherever they think they need to go, right? And question is, which one sort of produces faster, more efficient, more effective outcomes. I guess we'll find out. Obviously they've seemingly cracked something here. They claim spiking brain achieves more than 100 times the speed of traditional models in some cases. Like that is incredible, right? So if they've been able to like 1x the speed in that short a period of time because they just put a lot of effort and focus on it, that should be eye-opening for everybody in North America. And so part of it is, you know, I sometimes wonder too, like, are some of these AI model leading foundational model companies going to become so important strategically for the United States as an asset or whatever? Will they become nationalized or will they become, you know what I mean? Like, will there be efforts to sort of, okay, everybody has to work on this problem because that's the problem we need to solve to remain the world power. I'm not sure, right? But I think we're just the strategic imperative for nations is becoming bigger and bigger. And this is now it's interesting. So I'm kind of rambling here, but Jensen Huang talks about so the CEO of NVIDIA talks I talk about this in one of my presentations, but he talks about sort of the different waves of AI adoption. So things like chatbots being the first wave, agents being the next wave, things like that. And the final wave of AI adoption he calls sovereign AI, which is AIs that can kind of like kind of sort of help and maintain the sovereignty of a nation, of a company, whatever. And in Canada right now, I know Mark Carney recently talked about a big sovereign AI fund. There's, Canada's also trying to figure out how to become more sovereign from an AI perspective, data sovereignty, so that we don't have to rely on data centers in the United States as much. So, this is a big geopolitical conversation now, and the stakes are really, really, really high. And so, we're seeing a lot more of these types of articles come out of China. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of innovation come out of the US as well. Europe kind of shot itself in the foot a little bit by some of its data and privacy protection and some of its consumer protection things around AI. So, what they're going to do is to be determined. And, my question is sort of like how Canada's going to come out of this as well, right? And I think it's the trade negotiations between the Trump administration, Canada, and North American sovereignty and there's a lot of big things happening around all of this stuff, and it's all interrelated to some extent.
You can say that again. I feel like there's a lot of big things happening all the time in everything.
Yeah.
It's just a very, yeah, very great time to be alive. Interesting time to be alive.
Since this seems to be the China episode, maybe we'll end with a Chinese proverb that is, "May you live in interesting times."
I love it. I think that's a great place to end it. Yeah,
Nice. Excellent. Well, thanks for the chat. I feel like we were a little rambly today, but lots of interesting topics and lots of big geopolitical things. So, again, for me, it's just about pay attention. Don't think and don't wait for AI just to happen to you. Whether you're a parent, whether it's a community member, whether it's a business leader, whether it's just in your job, it's impacting every aspect of life, whether you want it to or not. So, start learning and pay attention and sort of don't just let it happen to you.
absolutely. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Bye.